Okay then, so welcome back to Brain, Biology and Beyond, and today we're going to be learning about autism spectrum disorder. We're going to cover the features of autism, including the symptoms, explain the neurobiology of autism, and we're also going to look at some of the different interventions for autism and how it can be helped within the classroom setting. So autism as a condition is a relatively young condition, first described in the 1940s. Leo Kanner recorded delays in language, and lack of interest in relationships with others. And Han Asperger focused on older children and adolescents and found a profound disregard for other people as the main symptoms of autism. Obviously, he called it Asperger syndrome, but these days everything is classified under the label of autism spectrum disorder. There has been a historical shift in autism over the years, where in the early days of its categorization, there was some overlap in thinking between schizophrenia and autism. Obviously, now we know that there is an absence of psychosis in ASD, and the causation we now know is primarily genetic, with some environmental factors that we'll talk about later on. There's about 40 to 90% genetic factors, with 80 to 90% heritability in monozygotic twins, which means that if you are a twin with autism, then 80% to 90% of the chance will be that your twin has got it as well. Autism was formerly seen as an untestable and untreatable condition, and this is no longer the case due to advances in behaviorism and various intervention. Symptoms of autism can be condensed into issues with social reciprocity and communication issues, limited speech, poor eye contact, restricted repetitive behaviours, strong need for routine, leading to distress if it's not followed, sensory overload, emotional regulation issues, including meltdowns, and masking as a result, and trying to fit in. Now, these symptoms are found within the neurotypical population as well, however, at a far lower level and to a far lesser level of impairment in the function, which is a key part of the diagnosis. So, speaking of that diagnosis, one must have persistent deficits within each of the three areas of social communication and interaction, as well as 2 to 4 types of restricted repetitive behaviours. And these symptoms should be pervasive in many environments, not just in one. These include persistent deficits and interactions across multiple contexts. For example, deficits in non-verbal communication, social interaction, deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships, restricted repetitive patterns of behaviour or interest and activity of at least 2 of the following. So stereotypes or repetitive motor behaviours, insistence on things being the same way every time, inflexible to routines, ritualised patterns of verbal and non-verbal behaviour, highly restricted and fixated interests that are abnormally intense, hyper or hypo reactivity to sensory input, so leading to sensory overwhelm in some cases, and unusual interests in sensory aspects. Symptoms must be present in the early development period, but may not become fully manifested until later when social demands exceed the capacities. As well as these, symptoms have to cause clinically significant impairment in social or other important areas of functioning, such as work, and the symptoms should not be better explained by intellectual disability or global developmental delay, which are separate conditions. Now, autism has increased in prevalence quite highly, as you can see there from the picture, 317% from 2000, whereas now approximately 1 in 36 people with autism, as opposed to the 1 in 100 that was back in 2000. And the reason for this is not due to environmental factors increasing the levels of autism, as certain people within power, such as Donald Trump, will try and make you believe, but indeed due to heightened awareness, perhaps decreased stigma, and more people seeking diagnosis for it as a result. Autistic traits are continuously distributed across the population. Symptoms or behaviours vary in severity and frequency. Obviously, it's that severity and frequency which can lead to that diagnosis, with functional impairment being key. The spectrum is not tending to be a straight line, it's more of a wheel with different severities of this. Okay, and everybody would have a level on this wheel, but obviously the functional impairment comes with autism when there would be great impairments with no language, sensory, perception, executive functioning, etc. Symptoms of autism spectrum disorder are highly heterogeneous and differ vastly between people with autism. Some people may be, very much like talking, perhaps inappropriately. Some people may be non-verbal. There is a huge diversity between them, and many individuals of autism don't want it to be removed, but want the barriers considered when it comes to functioning in society. In young children, autism can present in the following ways: eye gaze, not mediating communication, few social communication skills, facial expressions, inappropriate responses and gestures and sounds being made. Developmental regression is quite common, with a third of autistic people or people with autism losing some skills. Failure to anticipate in turn-taking games, like and dislike of sensory features and textures, and lining up objects again and again. Later in childhood, autism may look something like this. They may need more reciprocity to regulate their emotions, i.e. help from external sources. They might have issues disentangling co-occurring problems. Referrals may occur alongside anxiety and depression, which are commonly comorbid in all. Difficulties with relationships and social interactions, lack of interest in social communication, lack of mentalizing or being able to feel and empathize other feelings, and not sharing with others. Now, that's not to say people with autism are not empathetic. Indeed, sometimes they can be hyper empathetic to a level where they feel on a very deep level. But there can be issues with mentalizing what people's intentions are, for example. Again, not interested in relationships. Later in adolescence, there might be decreased use of gesture, conventional, instrumental eye gaze. There may be less, there may be more eye contact than is necessary. There may be insistence on that routine and rituals and fixation on those occupations, including hobbies, collecting objects, reading about unusual topics, etc., and nothing else. Okay. Now, some of the domains socially that are impaired in autism are theory of mind. Now, theory of mind is the ability to read other people's intentions and feelings. And this can be demonstrated through the Sally-Ann task and the HAP triangles task, where you have these triangles sort of chasing each other around a maze, and we have to sort of work out what's going on there. People with autism will fail that. Sally-Ann task, again, they won't be able to see the character's intentions within that task. People at 4 to 5 years of age do not possess theory of mind, but autistic people would score worse on both tasks, even at age of 10 to 11, because they have a delay of theory of mind development and have also limited theory of mind development. Executive functions such as working memory, inhibition, planning are also impaired in autism, but are not always due to autism, and indeed ADHD can occur with autism as well, which is more common for the executive functions. Other impairments in autism include emotional recognition tasks. So what do these faces show me? What sort of emotions have we got here? And central coherence, where people tend to zoom in on small details rather than be able to see the big picture. Autistic people will show superiority on tasks where attention to detail is required, although this is not a diagnostic marker and performance on these tasks should not be used as a way to diagnose people for autism. Autism is a male-dominated condition with approximately 3-to-1 to 4-to-1 bias of autism in males. Diagnosis across social classes is higher in rates of higher social class and non-minority ethnic groups, potentially due to the public awareness and ability to diagnose being centered around males from these groups. Females are less likely to be diagnosed, partly due to this diagnostic criteria and also due to higher propensity to mask. Autism is predominantly genetic, and there are over 100 genes that are implicated within the development of autism. They tend to be high penetrance mutations or copy number variants, which explain about 10 to 20% of autism. Multiple different parallel pathways within brain development and the immune system also relate to autism, and there is no single pathway. Many of the genes involved in autism are involved in synaptic structure and function or chromatin modification to alter gene expression within brain development. Genes are also involved within glutamatergic neurons involved in development, and these genes are found frequently throughout the population, and it is often a case where people have to have a number of various mutations within these associated genes in order to have autism. The genes involved in autism can also be implicated in other comorbidities such as depression and ADHD, and this can explain in part why this can be higher in autism. Looking at the brains of people with autism, we can see that those with autism tend to have altered neural tracts, so white matter, which is important for the formation of myelin to allow the correct sending of nervous impulses. You've got an abnormal cortical surface growth between 6 to 12 months, and actually a greater brain volume between 12 to 24 months. However, it's not the volume that is the issue, it is the wiring and the connectivity being different that ultimately predicts autism. And indeed, the connectivity at 6 months can actually predict autism at 24 months, which is rather impressive. And various different regions involved within social cognition, including the superior temporal gyrus, the inferior frontal gyrus, and the temporal sulcus, are involved within autism. There are a number of environmental factors that are known to contribute to autism, including neonatal hypoxia, premature birth, folic acid during pregnancy, and indeed, some studies from mice suggest that the gut microbiome can lead to altered neurodevelopment, particularly if they are treated with antibiotics when young. This can increase the levels of autistic behaviours in models of mice, but does not necessarily mean that it translates over to humans. Many other factors, however, do not cause autism, despite what misinformation may be spread, including premature membrane rupture, prolonged labour, vaccination, high blood pressure during pregnancy, and IVF are not environmental factors that are associated to increase autism. Now, autism is obviously can be highly impactful to the person who has got it, and intervention tends to happen on whole school cultures of reducing stigma and celebrating neurodiversity. Staffing, i.e., EHCPs and student support plans, which can be followed and often are involved and produced with the individual with autism at the center of it, from using a person-centric approach, because different strategies are going to work well for different people with autism, the same with any other neurodiversity or educational need. We do not use it as a blanket term, despite the fact it is used in medical literature as a blanket term. Every person's case should be looked at on a case-by-case basis. And indeed, individual teachers need to look at that and how they can apply that within their practice. There are some top tips on the screen now for aiding autism within the classroom, including being calm, positive approach, modeling behaviour, be aware of the characteristics of autism, and obviously bear them in mind within our teaching. Use the About Me sheet or the student support plan, promote a welcoming environment, teach understanding and acceptance, be on the lookout for bullying, as autistic individuals may not always respond appropriately or at all and may mask that there is an issue. Ensure organisation addresses sensory issues, establish clear routines and habits to support transition. Consider seating to avoid sensory overloads and take in mind the sensory needs of that individual. Pay attention to the outlined strategies. Provide written rules of expectations and model. Use descriptive praise to build desired behaviours, such as please sit down rather than don't stand up. Okay, and using positive directions. Many of these factors apply to people without autism and are generally good practice. Here are the references that I used for this session today. I hope you found it useful. If you've got any questions, do let me know, and I'm happy to engage further with this. Thank you very much. Until next time, this has been Brain Biology and Beyond.